This episode is sponsored by Podium, our podcast host. For affordable podcast hosting and 25% off, go to Podium and enter the code CHATTER.
Good luck in the contest and have a good weekend. This is Golf 6 India Papa Uniform. Good luck. Good luck. This is.
Hello again and welcome to an episode of Chatter, a podcast from The Gist with me, Josh Hamilton. Robyn Vinter, the founder and editor of The Overtake, an independent news and commentary site, was our guest on today's show. Now, for anyone interested in the ins and outs of running a media company, especially an independent one, this is a fantastic episode to listen to. We got into the economics of independent media, the different ways in which the site has been funded since it started, and Robyn had some really fascinating insights into what works when you're trying to monetize a blog or a news site and what she found difficult about running The Overtake at a profit. Now, don't forget you can pre-order my book now, BREXIT, The Establishment Civil War. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to our email list or leave us a review of the podcast if you enjoy listening. That's how we grow and we really appreciate it. So without further ado, here is Robyn Vinter. Okay, so Robyn, we have finally got the microphone working and it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I just want to start with a little overview of maybe like your journalistic career to give people an idea of how you got here. Mm-hmm. I say here, I mean like running The Overtake, your little independent news site. If anyone doesn't know, go check it out. It'll be in the description below. But yeah, Robyn, how did you find your way to journalism and The Overtake?
It's probably quite a long story, which I'll try and be succinct with. So I left school with like A-levels and was like, I really don't know what I want to do. And someone just kind of mentioned in passing, like, oh, you'd be good at journalism. And I was like, yeah. And I just decided to do it, like based on one person saying that. So I applied for uni. So I took a year out before I went to uni, and then applied for uni and did journalism at Leeds Beckett University. It was called Leeds Met back then, but it's Leeds Beckett now. Which is a really good course actually. Like it's not I don't know what you'd call it. Like it's people would class it as a bad university. Like I think it's like maybe like sixth. Oh, it was like sixth lowest. I think it is better now actually, but it was like sixth lowest in the rankings when I went there. But the journalism course is really good, which is something that happens quite a lot. I've noticed with journalism courses because they're quite practical. So universities that do a good job of those courses are often better at doing vocational courses anyway. And I suppose it depends what you want to do. I never wanted to do anything academic. Like it was half and half. So there were some essays and there were some modules that were just like, you know, for me, like very uninteresting, like writing a load of boring essays about journalism when I wanted to just be doing it. So that for me that was a really good course. And then I graduated in, I think it was 2011, and it was like basically kind of the peak of the financial crash, the last financial crash, and nowhere was hiring any journalists. But so I didn't get a journalism job initially, but I kind of kept a lookout, and then somewhere that I'd done work experience, which is an agricultural publication called Farmers Weekly. They said, oh, we've got a job vacancy. Do you want to come for an interview? I went and I got the job, which is really good. So I moved to London. I'm from Leeds originally. I moved to London and started working there. So for somebody who now does quite in a lot of ways, quite mainstream journalism, I started off doing, writing about beef prices and things like that for the business pages of Farmers Weekly. But it was a really good start actually in journalism. And, actually at that time, I don't know what it's like now, but at that time the trade publications were paid quite well. And and like the office was just full of nice people. And generally it was actually like a really good job to have as a first job. But I knew I didn't want to stay in farming journalism forever. So I started at a publication called London Loves Business, which I think is still going. It changed hands briefly, I think, but I think it's still going. And that was a much more, at the time that I worked there, it was very like new media. So it was like, we were making graphs and embedding them, which was, I don't know, I would say like it wasn't like, we weren't like the first people doing it, but there weren't that many publications doing like interactive kind of stuff. And it's quite fun, even though it was still writing about business, it was quite fun. And you could kind of do whatever you wanted within reason. So I did that so I worked at Farmers Weekly 2 years and I did that for 3 years. Then I got made redundant from there. So like the owner at the time, well, it actually went into liquidation and got bought by somebody else. But when it went into liquidation, I got made redundant, which as a journalist is something that will happen to you. Like it's inevitable, basically, no matter what type of journalism you're in, unless maybe you work for the BBC. That's probably the only thing I can think of. You're extremely likely to get made redundant. So at that time, I'd kind of already been thinking of a bit of an idea for the Overtake. So I was like, there needs to be something that's kind of like good journalism, like good quality journalism for younger people, but that's not really worthy and not really, I don't know, just like talking down to people or, I don't know, not having a sense of humour. And I was like, there are a lot of brands that can do that kind of stuff. Even stuff like Amnesty International, which is like, obviously it's a charity, so you'd expect it to have like a certain tone of voice, but at the time they were doing some really good campaigns and stuff, and I was like, there's a lot, like journalism needs to take a leaf out of this book. So I'd kind of had it in mind for a while, and I was just like, somebody should do it at first. And then when I got made redundant, I went freelance for a while, and I worked at the I newspaper, which is now owned by the Daily Mail Group, but at the time was owned by Johnston Press, which is now JPI Media. And so I worked there for a while. That was really good. I actually really loved it there, but I'd already planned to move back up to Leeds at this point, partly like personal reasons. Like we were living in London, like we just knew we would never be able to buy anywhere, and we were getting to like late 20s, like early 30s, and we were like, we don't want to, this is not the existence we want to have like forever. So we chose to come back up to Leeds, which I don't think was like the smartest move journalism wise, because realistically, if you're looking for a job in journalism and it's like you really, and that's what you're adamant that you really want to do, you want to be a journalist, like you should just move to London and that's it, because there's just so few jobs coming up anywhere else, so few people hiring, that it's just, I don't know, you have to be very lucky to get a job outside of London. You have to be lucky to get a job in London, to be fair, but you have to be very lucky to get a job outside of London. So I moved back up to Leeds, and I was like, I know that I'm not going to be able to get a job here, even though I've got, at that time I think I had like maybe 6 years experience as a journalist, and I'd worked in the kind of publications that you can tend to get hired. Like if you've got a background in business, you can basically get hired, generally speaking, within the world of journalism. But I didn't want to stay in business. I wanted to do different stuff. And so I kind of I'd had the idea for the Overtake for quite a while, kind of started working on it a little bit behind the scenes, like just on my own, kind of part-time while I was doing freelance work. And then launched it in October 2017, which sort of doesn't feel like it's that long ago, but actually it is. And then we kind of like built the team over time, and people just got in touch with me saying, can I help? And at first I was like, no, like I haven't got an office, I haven't got, like, it's just me. Like I know it looks like it's more people, but it is just me. And then, some people really, really nagged, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. Like you can come and help. So then, so I like quite quickly built a team of really good and like versatile and different writers. And I think that's been like one of the reasons why it's been so successful is, everybody was a nobody. It wasn't like I'd I suppose I could have asked a load of friends in national news to be like, oh, you write some stuff. But it kind of went against what I wanted the Overtake to be, which was about people who maybe they're not necessarily journalists, or maybe they just need a break in the industry. Like, it's so hard to get anything published, in a good publication.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can be a success. Like, I'm a successful writer. Like, now I've got 10 years experience as a journalist. I've written for The Guardian, The Telegraph, like The Eye, like I mentioned, The New Statesman, BuzzFeed. And even then, like, most of my pictures still get rejected, like my freelance stuff. So it's so difficult. It's incredibly difficult. A lot of it is about building contacts and stuff. But yeah, if people don't get that first start in the industry, it's so hard to get anywhere. So yeah, so I kind of like fundamentally felt like I would take a chance on people, which some of it didn't pay off. Like, some people sounded like they had a great idea for a piece and that they'd done their research, and then it come back to you like completely different, and barely had full stops in it, and you'd just be like, oh God, why am I paying somebody for this? But then on the other hand, there are some amazing people that just like, hadn't been given a chance, that have just I don't even know where they've come from. They just got their head screwed on, and they're just so good. So yeah, so it's a bit of a risk, really, but yeah, it seems to be working out okay at the moment.
So when you talk about finding writers for the Overtake, like, how do you go about that? Do you have, especially as an indie outlet, do you have like a budget that you're willing to pay them for their work, or was at the start was it very much like based on, okay, maybe we're gonna pay you if we get some clicks on this, or because I know that is it Evolve Politics model is basically depending on how like much revenue your article gets is how much they will pay you as a freelancer or a staff writer. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I do remember that was when I was submitting some stuff to them during an election cycle at some point. I don't know when.
Yeah.
There's been too many of them. It's all a blur.
Yeah, well, no, yeah. So I've never done anything like that, and I fundamentally think it goes against journalism because it's sometimes like somebody who's got like 50 followers on Twitter might have like some really unique insight, and then somebody who, I mean, like, what was it recently, like one of Boris Johnson's kids wrote a piece for Vogue, and it was shit, obviously. But it was like, and people were like, how the hell did this get commissioned? And I was like, because everyone's fucking reading it because she's got a name for herself. So even though it's rubbish and it's, like most of it was absolute nonsense, she had no insight about anything at all. I mean, obviously it's Vogue, so it wasn't really supposed to be like...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not exactly the centre of hard-hitting journalism, is it?
No, well, you know what? The funny thing is, actually, the weird thing is about Vogue is like they do some incredible features sometimes, but like it's like all wrapped in this like just bullshit stuff about really expensive clothes. And if you work in that industry, fine. To be honest, like for probably about 5 years, I was like an avid Vogue reader. Like I had a subscription, got every issue, because like I say, the features, it's rare to find like super long features that are just like pages and pages of really well written stuff. And like not all of it was about clothes, some of it was about clothes, but not all of it was. And that's not my background as well, I should say. Like I can barely afford to shop at Topshop. I've never really had any ambitions above Primark, to be honest. But yeah, but I just found it really interesting. But yeah, so anyway, about Boris Johnson's daughter in Vogue. Yeah, I feel like in that scenario, somebody who had something like really interesting to say would share that, and it would get a handful of clicks, and then Boris Johnson's daughter would share that piece and it would get hundreds of thousands of clicks, and it's just bullshit. So yeah, so that's why we've never done anything like that. And it's not to say it hasn't crossed my mind, because it is a way of financing it. But I think your job as an editor is to choose articles that, in my opinion, choose articles that people will read, and also choose articles that have value outside of how many people read them. but some publications don't work like that, and I can kind of understand because it's really difficult to make it work financially.
Yeah. So like I'm honestly like really intrigued as to where you stand on the so someone once said to me that journalism is a lot like comedy, or writing is a lot like comedy, in that you have to have a lot of practice before you're not terrible. And that like for anyone to gain, like I wouldn't have paid me for my first paid pieces.
Yeah.
Like if I'm completely honest, they were utter rubbish copy for like some tech website, but like I wouldn't have paid for them, and I was getting paid for them. How do you justify that balance between, okay, because I completely understand you're an indie, you want to be able to pay people for their work because journalism has to be paid for. I totally understand. That's why I write most of the stuff myself on my own site at the minute and produce almost all of it myself, because I'm not at a point where I can pay people, and therefore I'm not going to ask people to contribute unless they really want to post something, like, and they just say, oh, can you please put this up? Where do you find that balance between like giving beginners opportunities and paying for things that are worth your money, basically?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've always paid really poorly, and people know we're not paying badly because we're taking off a load of profits. Like most of the time, I'm not paying myself. It's not like it's all going in some kind of shareholders' pockets or anything. So people know that basically every penny that comes in goes out on something, and we spend most of the money on freelancers. And I did have staff for a while, but we don't anymore. Everyone's freelance. And so we pay everybody the same. So if I have, a celebrity write for us, or somebody with, the same amount of experience as me, that's been a journalist for a decade, they get paid the same as somebody who, we're the first place that they've written for. Because I think that's the only way of doing it that's kind of fair. And I think everybody understands, everybody who pitches to us understands what the rules are. Everyone gets paid the same. There's maybe, it hasn't really happened yet, but there's maybe, if someone came to me with something amazing and was like, if you pay double, you can have it, maybe then I would stretch to it. But it'd have to be, an interview with Barack Obama or something, it'd have to be something really good. So we pay the same no matter what, and that makes things a little bit easier. And if people, like we pay £50 an article, and if people won't write for that, like I understand, and a lot of people wouldn't write for that because they don't feel like it's enough. But I also think like a lot of our writers are people who otherwise would, that 50 quid, it would take them a day working in a bar to earn that, and they'd much rather spend that day writing an article. So that's how I see it. And other people in the industry don't see it like that, and they think it's insulting that we pay so low, but we pay what we can, and it's as simple as that. But like you say, the quality of some of them isn't good, and then it ends up being, I end up having to put a lot of time into editing them where they're able to be edited. There have been a few times where I'll say, sorry, like I just can't publish this, but it's really rare because I've had some real nonsense filed to me and managed to make it into something that people want to read. And I think that's what everybody should be doing for people trying to get into the industry. The things that frustrate me, badly written things aren't the worst thing. The worst is when people will pitch me something and they'll send something completely different. And that's something that I can't abide, because at least you know what you're going to get, even if it's bad, like, you know what you're going to get, and you can go back to them and say, okay, could you maybe interview someone about this, or could you find some stats on this, or could you try again with the intro? And usually they will, and you can kind of, it's a lot of work, but you can make it work. And I think, like, I've forgotten now, because it's so long since my first piece was published, I've forgotten like the feeling of pride that it gives people to have something published and to get paid for something, that sometimes I'm a bit flippant about it, and I have to like remember, like someone will reply, be like, thanks so much, like it looks so good on the site, and I'm really pleased, and like I never thought I'd be able to have something published, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of partly why I'm doing this whole thing. So I don't know, like it is difficult, but for every piece of rubbish that arrives, a piece of gold arrives. And the one thing I do before I commission people is if someone sends me a link to their blog, I'll look at it, and if the writing's good, then that might be enough to persuade me to commission them. So I think people get worried a lot when they pitch me and they don't have anything like professional looking, because they're like, oh, I'm not actually yet a professional journalist, and they're trying to be professional, which I understand. And actually, if someone just like, I've commissioned a lot of like copywriters and bloggers and people from all over who've sent me a good pitch, and when I've looked at their writing, it's good. And actually, in a lot of ways, sometimes looking at someone's blog is a much better indicator of how good at writing they actually are compared to a published piece somewhere else, because sometimes I think about it when I'm editing, I think, oh, they're going to use this link to get more work, which is fine, but whoever commissions them won't know how much editing I've done over it and how much I've like made it make sense. So and that's the thing usually with someone's blog, it's them writing unedited, or them editing themselves, and what you see is what you get, really. So a sample of writing is really important for me, and I'll rarely commission. I don't think I ever would commission anyone without seeing what their writing's like, actually, to be honest. But a blog's fine.
Well, yeah, that gives you like a good understanding of like their kind of voice, even if there's a few typos. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Exactly.
So what would you say was your biggest challenge that you've had running the Overtake?
Money. Money is the biggest challenge. I mean, I suppose one thing that I know that like I really benefit from is having a background in journalism. So I don't have to question myself on anything. I know media law, or the basics of media law anyway. And so I think that for a lot of people who don't have that background, I think they worry that what they're doing isn't right, when it always is absolutely fine. So I think that's helped me quite a lot. But I don't think, not having that background shouldn't stand in anybody's way, because all it does is give you a big load of confidence that what you're doing is roughly right. And that, that goes with anything. It's like asking people if they'll be interviewed and then interviewing them and all that kind of stuff. Most journalists are doing it exactly the same, whether they have a background in journalism or, they've just started. But so with knowing that I have that, I could see that being a big issue for other people, but obviously it's not been for us. But yeah, money is the biggest thing. We chose not to have like programmatic ads on the site. So, like Google ads, I think it's called, and like all those kind of things. Yeah. We chose not to do that because of how much of a mess your site can look. Like, not to say, like most publications have some form of advertising like that. So that's fine. But we looked at, like, especially in the early days, like we were getting probably like the first month we got 100,000 hits, like uniques, which is fairly good. No, it's very good traffic.
Yeah, that's incredibly good traffic for a first month after launch. Like, that's
definitely. And we've had plenty of months that we've still had less traffic than that. So that's it's not to say that we have that traffic every month, but we had that the first month, and then so I looked at like how much we would raise with putting programmatic ads on. And it was like a few £100, and I was like, you know what? For like how shit the site would look with ads plus, and to make a few £100, we would have to have like a banner across the top. We'd have to have like skyscrapers down the side. We'd have to have like ones embedded in the text. And I was like, actually, for that amount of money, it's just not worth it. Or we felt it wasn't worth it anyway.
See, we did that. We had the exact same issue, except we're really, really stubborn, and the Google ads cash out is at £60, and it takes so long to get to that. and we are so close. We are just like being like, okay, we're just gonna wait. We're just gonna leave them there until we get our £60 cash out, and then the moment that is there, then we're just gonna stop.
Yeah. That's it, because you have.
It's not even that much money. We just like refuse to like not take it.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly how I would feel. Like the kind of money that you make on it is just like, it's nothing. It's like each click is like a fraction of a penny, and you're like, why would I even? It's like eyeballs on the page are worth more than that, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah. So we decided to do sponsored content, which does work better, is really hard to sell and really time consuming. So we haven't sold much of it, to be fair, but it's better money. And I think the advertiser gets a much better thing. So like to do sponsored content, all you got to do is like mark it up as an ad or sponsored or whatever it is on the site, and then it's perfectly legal. So yeah, and it's not, it's something that pretty much every publication does, and it's not a new thing either. People they've done it in newspapers and magazines for however long. So yeah, so that works quite well, and I would like to do more of that, but it's just we just don't have a salesperson at the moment, and it got to the point really where it was so hard to sell, and it's obviously going to be much harder now because of coronavirus. But it was so hard to sell at the time that I was paying more for the salespeople than they were bringing in. So then I had to get rid of them, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, and that was nothing about their ability. That was just like, it's really hard to sell. And
what sort of sponsor content were you trying to find? Because obviously it's the key is to find stuff that fits your audience well. Yeah. Like, did you have like a lead generation process, or was it just sort of seeing who offered you stuff, or?
Yeah, we tried a lot of different things, to be honest. Like we tried I think the thing that worked well for us that I would like to do, that I would do again, that we just kind of like, I'm not going to call it an innovation because it's not like innovative, but it was like something that I hadn't seen anywhere else that we started doing, was making lists of like great, it might be like apps that you should download before Christmas, or gifts for lesbians, like like kind of niche things.
Okay.
And yeah, and like approaching like, I don't know, 100 companies and saying, do you want to pay 50 quid to be on this list? And if you could get 10 people, 10 companies with like 100 words each, they approve the copy that you write about them. Like I say, everything's marked as sponsored, so everybody who's reading it knows that the brands have had like a hand in it. That's 500 quid for an article, which is fairly good. And we built quite a good process for that, but it just involves sending and keeping track of so many emails. Like, I think people who have a bit better background in sales would absolutely have nailed that process, I think. But I had two people. One was super enthusiastic and I think will be incredible, but was still at school. Like, she was 17. So she obviously didn't have a background in sales. The other person I had a background in marketing and a different type of sales. And it just, I don't know. They weren't the right people. They were brilliant, and I'm still in touch with both of them and I love them, but they weren't the right people to just do that kind of churning out of like trying to send like a bunch of emails and keeping track of them all. So yeah, but that is something that I think we could do more of, that works really well. The difficulty was like we had some people that just like didn't pay, because I think they probably thought like, 50 quid, like, oh, what's the point in paying that? It's nothing, but to us actually is money that we really need. So we tried that, and that worked quite well, although there won't be any more of those in the near future, I don't think. And then we have our main source of revenue. We had a few companies that gave us some money, which was really nice, like £200 a month or whatever, which I found really helpful and like actually genuinely kept us afloat a few times that we were really struggling and like basically going to close. And then we've also got we've got Patreon, and like one that's very similar called Steady, which is actually better than Patreon.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is it better?
It's better because some of these are a bit niche, but Well, first of all, Patreon is in dollars, and there's not even a way of explaining it in pounds. You know, like you can't even say, "Oh, it's £3 a month" for people in the UK. You've got to do it in dollars. So British people have got to mentally convert it into dollars to decide whether they want to support.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly. And then so they when it goes from when it goes from the bank account, it gets converted into dollars to go to Patreon. Then you withdraw it to PayPal and it's in dollars, and then you convert it back to pounds. And it's just like we were losing we still are like losing money on, well, not losing money obviously, but like a chunk of the money is just going on currency conversion. Yeah, exactly. Which is ridiculous. And they haven't, as far as I'm aware, they haven't solved that problem. Like I did look into it quite a lot. They haven't solved that problem. You can't embed Patreon on the website, or maybe you can now, but when we set it up, you couldn't embed it on your website in any way. So you couldn't even put it in a page.
Seriously?
Whereas
Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, they might have changed it now, but like we set it up about a year ago, and there was just no way of like embedding a little thing. I mean, I think you can embed like a button that allows people to click through, but like you couldn't embed a checkout, you couldn't embed any details about it or anything like that, which was just like really unhelpful. Because I think their point was that you're supposed to have, like Patreon's point is that you're supposed to have everything on your Patreon page. Like your Patreon page is your website.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously better for their traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like some of the analytics you get from it aren't that good. And yeah, there's just a few other little things that I didn't like. And we did have one. It wasn't actually the fault of Patreon, but we did have one month where they changed something on PayPal and we couldn't withdraw the money because somehow the currency conversion page was broken and we couldn't convert it, and which meant we couldn't withdraw it. So I couldn't pay anyone, and it was like so stressful. So it really put me off Patreon forever. I mean, we still got it because we've got supporters on there that wouldn't want to move over, but I don't push people to that page anymore. So Steady is a European company. Like you can do everything in pounds. Just you can embed stuff. You can create paywalls if you want to. Like we don't use paywalls, but it is something we've been thinking about. So, like if you've got like someone's written an amazing piece and you think, oh, actually this is really worth people paying or like joining to be able to read, you have the option to do that, although we don't. You can have the checkouts embedded in the page, which has made loads of difference in terms of how many supporters we have. So it's just 100 times better, and you can get in touch with real people when if you're like, oh, I can't work out how to, like this morning I was like, I need to export a list of all the Steady supporters, but I can't find it. Like I can't for the life of me work out where it is. I know it exists, but I can't find it. And then I did find it and it was fine. But like you can just email one of the team and they get back to you, which is great because Patreon is not like that. So those were the lots of reasons. But yes,
a few short reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So if if people are thinking of it, I know Patreon's more famous, but actually that's the other thing as well. We discovered that most people didn't support anything else through, you can like click on, I don't know whether you know, but you can click on people through Patreon and see what else they support.
Yeah.
And we noticed that like 95% of our supporters only supported us.
Okay.
They'd set up Patreon to support us. So like there's an argument that Patreon is easier because people already have an account, but actually that wasn't the case for us. Like people would have set it up with something else that isn't Patreon.
Do you think that's more because it's a US based company and most of your readers are in the UK?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And I think like, I don't know, a lot of our early supporters were like friends and family, like my friends and family of other members of the team. So like, like my partner's mum isn't going to have a Patreon account. Like she's not going to follow like some kind of niche musician on Patreon and already support her or anything like that. So that it's, horses for courses, I suppose, but for us, Steady's significantly better.
Okay.
definitely.
Well, that's interesting for anyone who's interested in trying to monetize themselves.
Mm.
Do you get the vast majority of your revenue from those services?
At the moment, yeah. So, and what I'm hoping actually is something that I've always wanted from the start, but never managed to get is some grants for some of the journalism that we do, because some of it's really expensive. So, when I had a team, but it would be the same now with a freelancer, like if I wanted to pay somebody to work for a week on something, like we just don't have that kind of money. Even if it's like the most incredible investigation you've ever seen, like we just wouldn't be able to find that money. So I think there didn't used to be grants out there, but there are grants out there now. Our biggest problem is that I'm really bad at applying for them. Like we've never had any success through applying for grants, like not a single penny as a grant. So
Maybe you need to
that's
get a
something.
professional writer in.
Yeah. I think that's part of the problem actually. Like, I think so from speaking to people, a lot of it is like there's like a method to applying for them, and it's like not that easy to do if you're not used to it, and if you haven't like someone. I've got a friend who like does it for a living, and she was like, who offered to look over the stuff, to be fair, but she was like, once you have one or two successes, then you'll work out what you did right. But until that point, it's impossible to know.
Yeah,
like
I guess
what you're doing.
I guess it's like trying to find your first job. You're like, but what do they want to know on my CV? What is relevant? What is relevant? And you're staring into Duke of Ed bronze, going, well, that could push me over the edge. And then
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. So so we're hoping to do that, and I do think some of them are very niche, and we weren't the right fit for them. But I think, if there's anybody listening who has their own publication, it's always worth applying for them, even though they're really time consuming, because I know quite a few people who've got like a fair bit of money, like 50 grand or something, which would be like transformative for us. So
yeah, like that. Well, for a small outlet, that's got to be like at least a
that's
year's running cost. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
you
Yeah.
can do whatever you want.
Yeah, it'd be wild. Yeah. Yeah.
Go back
So
to covering those farmers' beef stories.
I know, right? Yeah. Back to what I love. So yeah, that's what we're kind of hoping. I think really, if I'm being totally honest, I think if the Overtake's going to have any kind of like long-term future, we've got to work out either grants or another way of having some money. Because as great as our supporters are, and we've got maybe like 150 supporters who are just brilliant, and it's just not enough really to, I work part-time at the moment at the Yorkshire Post, which is a regional newspaper, which is great, and I like it there, and I'm glad to have regular income. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be full-time on the Overtake, and I was for a while, but it's just very difficult financially.
Yeah, I can imagine. So we've talked a little bit about Patreon and Steady, but like that kind of model generally of like subscription based on sort of your exclusive content production or not in your case. Actually, I really like that. I hate sites that like paywall their content, but at the same time I'm like, wish I could paywall my content. That would be nice. Like I'm kind of jealous of it. But do you see the Patreon model as the way that like journalism is gonna sort of happen going forwards? Like, do you see that as being the way forward? Because like, okay, at the start of our conversation, you mentioned that, okay, you didn't want to have like just blanket ads from Google or Taboola or whatever the service is that is providing it. You just don't want blanket ads all over the page. You want it to be focused on your work, and then like any ad space is for yourselves to try and drive Patreon or Steady subscribers, or here, check out our other content, or sign up for our mailing list, follow us on Facebook, all the kind of general stuff. But and I've seen that that's more and more common. Like one of my favorite outlets actually is, people probably roll their eyes, is Vox in America. I think their journalism is so great, and their podcasts are so good.
Yeah, and it's like such good digital journalism as well. You just don't see digital journalism that good in a lot of places.
Yeah, they're like they've got like 60 or so like permanent staff, and there's not a single advert on their website anywhere.
Yeah.
Their podcasts have some like plugs for different services like most podcasts will have, but generally like they're very ad free, and like they don't even have like Patreon subscribers, and they're still doing like absolutely great. Like they have actually launched a campaign in the last couple of weeks because of Corona, because of the lack of advertising revenue. But do you think like this is going to push journalism like more quickly towards that sort of, well, hoping to not be reliant upon ad revenue and trying to get like supporters rather than, the traditional model, you go back 5-10 years, you go onto like the Daily Mail website or whatever, and it'd just be pop-up central.
God, yeah. That serves you right for going on the Daily Mail, to be fair.
Well, that's true.
I think it will. I think it'll be different types of memberships. So I think a lot of it will be, what would you call it? Just like traditional subscriptions. So, you can't see any content unless you subscribe to the publication. And I don't know, I'm in two minds really, because we would have zero readers, or we would have had zero readers at the start of the Overtake trying to make people pay to read it. And not because it wasn't good enough to be paid for. That same content on a paid for publication would have been successful, but just because we didn't have any kind of track record, we didn't have any kind of advertising budget. So, like, I don't know whether you've seen Tortoise, the like slow news publication.
I have not.
Well, they're worth having a look at, because they have quite a, not a strict paywall, but it really is a membership. Like you can't really view the content without joining. But they launch with a big ton of money. They launch with already successful writers who were quite well known from other places. And like they had quite a well planned strategy for getting members. So they've done really well out of nowhere almost, but that's because they had that money. I don't even think we would do a paywall now on the Overtake, to be honest, even though we've got, like, I don't know what, I should have actually looked at the traffic. You know what, while I'm talking to you, I'll just look at the traffic for April. So we had quite a good April.
Well, people are sat at home. It's actually quite interesting. I was listening to a podcast on NPR the other day, and they were talking about how podcast like listening figures are like through the floor since coronavirus started.
That's interesting.
And I think it's because no one is commuting.
Yeah.
I listen to all my podcasts while I'm on the way somewhere.
Yeah.
Or like a little bit maybe while I'm making lunch, but like mainly on the way somewhere. And because I'm sat in the house, I'm just not listening to as many podcasts. And I love my podcast. Like I would sit and listen to it all day if I had to be on a plane or whatever. And at the minute, like I just find that I'm only listening to a couple, and I'm not sure what that is. But I find that, like I've seen as well, our own like readers, like the site has gone like way, 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 way up, even just in the last month, despite having only like recently started to repost content, haven't got back in the country.
So what did we have? We had like 300,000 uniques in April, which was quite good for us. So, like potentially people would have, of those people would have paid to read the content, but I don't think they would. I think of those people, a handful would have paid realistically. Like we maybe picked up some supporters during that month, because we've got the comedian Frankie Boyle is one of our columnists. He's brilliant because he gives us the columns for free, which I never. Really? Yeah, honestly,
what a nice guy.
Yeah, honestly, like I think he's got such a reputation for being like an offensive comedian.
Well, he is. But it's not a reputation. It's truth. Like he is horrendously offensive.
But like if you actually like follow him and like see the stuff he's talking about and see the kind of things that he's interested in, he does a lot of like really good work for people who aren't represented well in the media. Like he did a hunger strike a few years back for someone who was in Guantanamo Bay. So like he's
really?
He's really Yeah,
I
he's
did
a
not know
really,
that.
really decent guy. Yeah, it's like he's accidentally cultivated this, like, well, not even accidentally, like deliberately probably cultivated this thing that he's an offensive comedian, but like he's actually like I don't want to call him political because he's not really political, but he's just like, I don't know, yeah, just a really good guy. So he gives us those columns for free. And he, to be fair, like the first column he wrote for us, he was a columnist at the Independent before us, and he moved to the Independent because he didn't like it at the Guardian
Because
because
they
wanted
refused to publish one of his pieces, didn't they? Because I remember he
yeah,
posted on Facebook, didn't he? Ended up
yeah,
just like
yeah.
putting it on Facebook, and like the Guardian wouldn't have published it. I cannot remember for the life of me what it was about, but I remember being shocked that the Guardian wouldn't print it.
Yeah, it wasn't even offensive either. It was just like making a very strong point that actually the media should, these are points that the media should be making. And yeah, so but I think a lot of like the mainstream publishers wanted him to write in a certain way. So his when you read his columns for us, then it's like reading his stand-up. Like it's like reading his, he does that like opening bit to camera like at the start of his TV show,
the BBC one.
Yeah.
It was great. I miss it.
New World Order. Yeah, it's so good.
It was
yeah,
just Frankie
so
Boyle
good.
sat there with like a whole like sofa full of female comedians. That's what it always.
Yeah. That's it. And they're like, the BBC's like, oh, we can't get, it's so hard to get women for our panel shows or like people of color for our panel shows. And it's like, he would have like easily, like he could easily have all of his guests be women and like some people of color, like women of color, and they're amazing and brilliant, obviously. But yeah, so I don't know. I really rate him anyway, but he's been particularly good to us. Like he bought us, we needed a new mic for one of our podcasts, so he bought us a new mic.
That's nice.
And like, yeah, we've had a few people like that, to be fair. Like we've needed some kit, and like so many brilliant people have just like, some anonymously as well, just like bought us, like we needed a different type of microphone, so yeah, someone bought us one of those. Like there's so many, even just like we needed batteries for the recorders that we had, and we needed like stuff like that, and we just did an Amazon wish list. And normally I wouldn't use Amazon, to be fair, but it was the only way of doing it really that was easy for everyone. Yeah, and people just bought stuff off it and sent it to us, like notebooks and pens, and just stuff that we needed that normally I was spending the budget on. People were happy to contribute, which was just the nicest thing ever. What was I saying? I was just about a paywall. Like, people might pay to read his comments, but I don't think a lot of the time they would pay for the rest of the stuff. Like I subscribe to a handful of things, and if I go on the Telegraph website, no matter how good the article looks, I'm not subscribing to the Telegraph.
Oh no,
to read it.
Fuck
So,
that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
exactly.
right? If you want me to pay for fucking content and then you're gonna pay Boris Johnson 250 grand a year to write drivel, then you don't deserve my money.
Yeah. And it's a shame because like the Telegraph at the moment is doing like loads of amazing like women's football stuff and women's sport coverage. Like they're absolutely leading the way in that little subsection of stuff. So I want to support it, but like I'm not a Telegraph reader, so that's that.
Okay, no, let's not go down that rabbit hole. I was going to start talking about how bad the Telegraph is, but that could like send me on a spiral, and I want to do a lot of things today. So,
Yeah.
Well, anyway, moving on. So, like, what would you say was the biggest surprise you've had, like, running the Overtake?
I think the willingness of people to help out has been a huge surprise. I mean, sometimes people will want to help and don't actually follow through on it. We've had that a few times, and that can be, especially when it comes to money, that can be really annoying when people are like, "Oh yeah, I want to support you. Could you send me through all this information?" Like people dangling like big chunks of money over our heads and be like, "We send over all this information." So then I'll spend an afternoon like putting together all the stuff that they ask, and then I just don't hear from them again. Like stuff like that. That just like they just fundamentally don't understand like how busy we are and how difficult this is. So yeah, but apart from those people, like people who want to volunteer for free, who will do like some shitty jobs just to contribute. Although I don't think I ever ask anyone to do shitty jobs just to contribute, but people are willing to do that. Yeah, and just like, I guess, how generous people have been with their time and money, and how vocally supportive people have been as well. People sharing our stuff on Twitter and saying, "Oh, this is this is really good work." The social media. I really thought I was going to be like out there alone, like doing the stuff. And sometimes it does feel like that, to be fair. If we're having like a particularly bad time, it's just like, oh, what's the point? What's the point in any of this? But then, like, you never know, like the next day something good will happen and people will be like, oh, this is really good journalism. Like, this is kind of stuff that everybody should be doing. And I'm like, yes. So yeah, I think people will think I'm much more like upbeat and optimistic about it, but we just take each day as it comes. And you never know, this time next year we could be, rich and successful. Probably not, but but more likely is we'll be dead by this time next year. And I think you just have, when you run an independent publication, that that's going to be the situation. And sometimes it's just driven by how much emotional energy you have to give to it. And sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't.
So do you see this as a stepping stone to something else? Or is this like what, like, say you had the option to say, okay, I'm going to run the Overtake for the rest of my life, and it's going to be, okay, maybe some stress, it's going to be emotionally draining at times, but it will be financially like solid for the next 15 years as long as I keep working? Or would you prefer to start like something new, try a new project, go in some completely different direction?
I think if I knew it was financially secure, like if I was only worrying about doing the journalism, then I'd love to keep doing the Overtake, because it's, the stuff that we've been doing that other people have been looking at us and like being like, oh, we should do that. And I know that because people have told me. And like we've been nominated for 2 really good high profile awards for stuff that we've done, and I have so many ideas for projects that we can't afford to do, and so many people get in touch with stories that are just like amazing stories that we just don't have anyone available to do it. And I really want to show what you can do with such a small team, and some ambition and some like originality, I guess. So yeah, so if I knew the money was secure, let's say we got like a grant that like preserved the Overtake for 15 years, then yes, I think we've done a fraction of what we'd be able to do. So so I think I think there's just so much more that we could do. But having said that, I am being quite realistic, and I know that if something, like, I don't know, if like the Wall Street Journal came along and was like, oh, we really want you for this job in New York, do you want to come and do it? I'm like, yes. And it's not to say that I haven't been approached for things, but I haven't been approached for anything that I think fits with my skill level and that I would really want to do. And a part of that is because I live in Leeds. So it's, like if I was in London, it'd be a bit of a different story, but I know most publications don't like to have remote workers. Well, obviously at the moment.
I think that's going to change. Honestly, yeah, I think this will just like give everyone a slightly different perspective on remote working.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, and I've got a friend actually who, works in an office, like a shared office, like a it's not a WeWork, but a WeWork type situation. And she works for a London-based company, and she lives in Leeds, and she's just 4 days a week for them. And that works out perfectly for both of them. And it's just, I think people are just a bit reticent about having an employee that can't just nip to the office or can't work from the office. But like you say, hopefully that'll change.
Well, that seems like a nice place to leave it. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed that chat. Thanks for chatting to us, Robyn. Is there anything you want to plug?
I mean, I would say, so there's probably 2 things. We have our steady page, which I obviously went on about a lot, which you can just get to. If you go on the overtake.com, you can get to like on basically any page from there, and you can scroll down and find it at the bottom. And, like you can support us from just like a few quid a month, and it just makes the world of difference. And the other thing's my Twitter. Like if anyone's kind of like thought, oh, that was kind of vaguely interesting, I'm at Robyn Vinter on Twitter.
Okay, fantastic. So thanks, Robyn.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe to our email list or leave us a review of the podcast. Our guest on the next show will be Tatton Spiller from Simple Politics, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Until next time, thanks for listening.